Bonjour, nin Cassandra Spain Dishnikas, Mishki Gogmangdonji, Nemendo Dem Gaye, Kuchchengish and Gieji. So hello everyone, welcome back. My name is Cassandra Spade. I'm from Mishki Gogmang First Nation and I come from the Sturgeon clan. Today we're going to be looking at lesson 3 of the Indigenous Grassroots Activism unit. So the focus of this lesson is developing community-led solutions that are achievable, they're actionable, and they reimagine our communities in ways that can be really meaningful and heartfelt. In order to do this, we have to understand root causes of problems or the complexity of problems. And so we have to dig a little bit deeper than the actual problem that we see. We have to understand where it comes from. And in doing so, we can develop really meaningful or articulate key messages where we know the problem, we understand how it impacts our communities, and we can propose a solution where people can jump on board and get excited about the work that we're doing. And so today, the focus is all about problem solving or looking at problems. At the same time, we're going to make connections to the previous lesson where we understand what our core values are and what fuels our activism so that the work that we do is really meaningful to us. At the same time, we're situating ourselves in our communities. So understanding that we are part of a community and we are part of something. Therefore, what we do impacts others and what others do impacts us. It's that idea of interconnectedness. And so we're going to use these guiding values or these ideas to help inform our activism. And you may remember that we talked about asset and deficit-based approaches. Asset being that idea that we're building upon what our community already has, we're thinking of possibilities and opportunities, and we're really looking to reimagine our communities. This is the approach that we're going to focus on today, but you may remember that the deficit was the focus on the problem and just filling the gaps or filling the holes so the problem's not there anymore. But with the asset-based approach, we're really thinking of ways and solutions that are new and can be really meaningful to us. And so in saying that, we're going to do a brief overview and then get into it. So our overview is that we're going to look at what community-led solutions are, what is collective leadership, collective organizing, and collective action, and what does this mean to activism? Then we will look at root causes and what root causes are, where do they come from, how do we begin understanding that, and understanding that the problems are what we see and the root causes we may not always see. And so looking at complexities of problems in order to develop meaningful solutions. Lastly, we're going to talk about key messaging and how important it is in activism to understand your problem, to understand the complexity or the root cause, to understand how the problem impacts your communities. So how does it impact you? How does it impact your family? And what are the facts and data and statistics about it that you can collect or the information? And then in knowing those things, we can develop solutions that are really meaningful and they reimagine our communities in ways that we would like to see them as. And so that's what a key message is. It's short and simple. It's going to address all of those things, and it's going to be a great tool for your activism. So a community-led solution is when there is collective leadership. Sometimes we may think that a leader is just one person, but we are all capable of being leaders, and we are all leaders in our own ways. And we guide ourselves through our own leadership. Your leadership may look like you enjoy spending time doing artistic things and being involved in artistic processes, and therefore your leadership is focused on art. Or you may really love to speak to people and you love being around people and very social, and so your leadership may be in creating relationships to people or creating connections. And so everybody is very much capable of being a leader in their own way. And so when we start to recognize that every single person around us or every single person in our community is a leader, we can work towards supporting one another in the things that we value, thinking about our core values and what is important to us. And so when we understand that, we start to get this idea of collective leadership, where a leader is really just a person willing to make change in their community for the better. And this leads us to this idea of collective organizing. So when we come together, we self-organize we work together, and we want to create meaningful change in our community through collective organization, recognizing that we are all leaders, we come together, we organize together, and we're going to develop solutions for action. So we want to work together to develop an action that addresses an issue in our community in a meaningful way. So in order to develop a solution with our communities, or a community-led solution, we have to understand problems. And problems are very complex, pervasive, in-your-face things, and they impact every single one of our lives. So when we see problems, it's often very easy to identify that there is a problem, there's something wrong, there's something we don't like, there's something going on. But sometimes we don't necessarily always know how to address it or how to change it. And so we may want to get rid of the problem, but we don't know where it's coming from. And so when we look at this plant, we can see this structure of a problem. So the problem is the thing that we see. It's the plant, it's what's above the surface. Whereas the root cause, which is what the problem comes from or stems from, is underneath the surface. And we can think of things like roots of a plant. So we may not see this, sometimes we may see it, but it's an underlying issue, and it can be an issue in a system or a structure, in laws, policies, rules, regulations. It could even be an embedded cultural norm or social norm. And so root causes are something that exists within our society. They are ideas, maybe they're structures, but they are the base or the foundation of a problem. And so, as I was saying, some of the root causes that may exist may be structural. So maybe you're working in an organization or you're in a collective group, and the structure of the organization is off balance. So maybe one person is taking all of the work and they don't want to share the work, and then it's creating a lot of problems in the group. Or maybe somebody is doing no work and it's creating a lot of problems because you yourself have to do extra work, which is harder on your mental health, your emotional health, physical, spiritual, whatever it may be. And so a root cause of the structure might be that there's an imbalance. We can also think of root causes in systemic. And that may seem like a strange word, but it's just the system. So the systems that exist around us. Maybe it's the way our communities are organized, or maybe the type of leadership models that we have, where we elect one person into power. And that person, they make the rules and the regulations, and they develop laws and policies and structure. And so the system may be failing us, and maybe the reason why there is a problem. And then we look at the cultural, or this could be also a social norm. So sometimes there are deeply ingrained ideas in cultures and societies or groups of people, and those deeply ingrained ideas can harm others or create problems. And that is where those problems stem from. So when we think of root causes, we have to think that problems are very complex, and problems exist because of very, very long existing problems or very complicated root causes. And so in order to address a problem, we have to think, where does this problem come from? Where does it stem from? Why is this problem here? And what causes this problem? We know that there is a problem. We know we want to address it. We want to get rid of it, but we have to dig a little bit deeper. And so I'm going to use an example later on that talks about the root cause. So now that we understand that problems are very complex and they have root causes, we can start developing this idea of key messaging. So key messaging is when you understand your problem, you start to understand your impact, and you develop a solution. A key message is a very short way of talking to someone about an issue. So the problem is what is wrong, what needs to be fixed, and where does it stem from in our root cause. And we know that these are very complicated things. Our impact is when we provide facts and statistics, data, information, and stories about how the problem impacts our lives or impacts the lives of our communities. So this is when you want to do a lot of research or you want to have a really great understanding of how that problem impacts your life or those around you. Impact is really important as well because it gives credibility to the solution. It builds a nice foundation for the solution. It's a lot of research, it takes a bit of time, and also it's a lot of lived experience, because often when you experience a problem, you're going to know how best to address it. And so this leads us into our solution. And in a key message, the solution is the opportunity to act. So you want to give someone a way to participate in the solution. You want to have a community-led solution. So you want to involve a lot of people. And the solution is how you are reimagining reimagining your community, and how you are addressing the problem, and how are you tackling the problem. And so you want to give people ideas on how to help you or support you. And this problem impact solution is a really great way to organize information, especially for activism. So as I was saying, this leads to a key message. And a key message is strategic. So you're going to plan, you prepare ahead, you understand the problem, you know the impact, and you know what you want to say. Sometimes maybe you've even prepared yourself. So you're talking to yourself in your room, which I do all the time. Sometimes when I'm developing a key message, I'll just keep saying it to myself, because I know as soon as I go in front of people, I'm going to get really shy, I'm going to get nervous, and maybe I might forget what I'm trying to say. But you want to be really strategic, so you want to plan ahead. You want your key message to be simple, because sometimes you only have a certain amount of time to explain what is going on. So you want it to be straight to the point and simple. You want it to be compelling. You want it to connect to people. And so this is really honoring our lived experience and our stories and the way we exist in the world. So using our lived experience, or understanding our lived experience and honoring it and using it in activism, is really powerful, because then you show people that there are people being impacted by a problem, and that those people have faces and they exist, and they could be you. You also want a key message to be memorable. So you want a lot of repetition, or at least a little bit of repetition, but you want it to catch your audience and draw them in, and you want people to be able to repeat it after. So it needs to be memorable. At the same time, you want to be short, you want to be timely. Sometimes we're in a big room and there's lots of people, and there are lots of people waiting for their turn to speak, and they may get nervous, so they may forget about time, and they might not be aware of time. But remember that when you plan ahead, or you're being strategic, you're also timing yourself. So you want to honor other people's time by only using the time that's given to you, or the time that's needed. And lastly, you want this to advocate for something. So you want that solution, that community-led solution. You want some change. You want something to happen, because when you speak, you have something to say, and something very valuable to say, and you want it to create change. So in saying that, you want to give someone a way to participate in your activism, or to support it. You want to give someone an action that they can pick up and they can do to create change. So it is important to provide solutions that your audience can connect with and act on. So an example for me, a lot of my activism is around the revitalization of Indigenous languages in Canada, or just a way to protect the languages within our communities. For my home community, that's Anishinaabe-Moin. For yours, it could be Cree, it could be Ojibwe, it could also be Anishinaabe-Moin or Ojibwe, Ojibwe-Moin, or whichever it may be. And this is really important to me, Indigenous language. You may remember from last lesson that my core value is identity. And so for me, identity is made up of many things, but one thing that's really important to identity are the languages that we speak. And because I'm from Mishkigogumang, and I grew up around people who spoke Anishinaabe-Moin, this language is really foundational in developing who I am. So it's part of my identity. And that's why it's so important for me to advocate for language, to protect it, to preserve it, to talk about the importance of language and what language does. And so my core value of identity supports my love of language and my activism of language. And so this key message of Indigenous language is an example of that. I'm going to use my lived experience. I'm going to talk about my core value. I'm putting myself in my community, understanding that my community speaks this language. I'm interconnected to it because those around me speak, my family speak, and it's very important. And so those things guide my activism. Next, as I was saying, I want to develop a solution. So the problem or the thing that is happening to Indigenous languages is that they're on a rapid decline in Canada. And no Indigenous language is a protected language. They are all at risk of becoming extinct. So it's so important that we take care of our languages and we advocate for them and we create structures and systems that support them. This could be a school, immersion schools, but the importance is that we need to start speaking because the problem is that they're declining. And once our languages are gone, language carries a lot of knowledge and history and stories and culture and identity. And when a language is gone, those things start to go too. And so I'm starting to think about the root causes or the bigger problem, the bigger issue, the deeply rooted issue of language loss. The problem itself is that people the language is being lost, people are not speaking. But the root problem and what is really going to happen is we're going to start losing history and knowledge and stories. And so some of those causes are that our Indigenous languages are not official languages, they're not protected in Canada, and sometimes they're not seen as viable languages for jobs. And so when we think of those root causes, we have to change those things and we have to think of solutions to change those things. And we know that it's a structural and systemic and maybe a social issue. And so the problem is a rapid decline and loss of Indigenous languages spoke in Canada. The impact is currently there are 70 languages in Canada that all face the threat of extinction in the next few decades. So the 70 languages of Canada, they face the severe prospect of extinction, of no longer existing. And once a language dies, it cannot be brought back. So once the last language speaker dies, the language is gone too. And so a solution to address this problem is to invest and create policy and laws to support publicly funded Indigenous language immersion schools. So we want our structures and our systems and our governments and our leaders to create laws to support our languages, to be in our schools and to be taught in our schools from kindergarten all the way to high school, so that by the time we finish high school, we'll be fluent in our languages. There will be all of these resources and materials for our languages, and that our languages are protected and preserved. So this key message, it's short, concise, simple, prepared. I'm very much connected to it. And so at the same time, in using an asset-based approach to talk about this, when we talk about immersion schools or the solution of investing in immersion schools, we recognize that our assets are the people who speak the languages in our communities. That is a huge resource that we have and something that we can build upon. We already have school buildings in our communities, so we can use those schools to implement this education. And there is funding available, but we just have to advocate for it to be used in a specific way. And so this asset-based approach gives people a real way of acting and participating in the solution. I mean, we could even talk about people signing petitions or people rallying and advocating and raising awareness about this. And so there are lots of different ways that we can go with this. So once again, the key message, you want to prepare ahead and you want it to be simple and concise. So in summary of today, we were talking about community-led solutions, recognizing that we're all leaders and we all have very distinct perspectives and lived experiences, that we are all capable of organizing and coming together and bringing our leadership to these areas, and that we can collectively act on something together, that we can develop solutions as a community. Next, we talked about understanding root causes in a way to develop solutions that are meaningful. So when we think of root causes, we often see the problem, but we may not see what is causing the problem. So why the problem exists. We need to ask ourselves, how is this problem happening? Why is this problem happening? And where does it come from? So understanding the complexity of problems. Next, we move on to developing a structure that we can talk about problems in a very concise way. So we talk about problems, we talk about what is wrong, we understand the root cause, so we understand the complexity, and then we research and investigate the impacts, and we provide statistics and data and information, and we know how the problem is impacting our communities or our own lives. Then we can propose a solution that addresses the problem, and it understands the problem and the impacts, and a solution that can create meaningful change or be meaningfully felt. And we do this through this idea of key messages, understanding that key messages are simple, concise, clear, prepared ahead of time, memorable, and advocate for something. And we give our audiences or people we're talking to something to act on or a way to participate in the solution. And that leads back to community-led solutions where we can collectively organize and come together in addressing issues. And so the summary of today was that we talked a lot about problem solving and developing solutions that are meaningful and how to do this, looking at key messages as one of our tools. We also are reinforcing the importance of core values, what fuels our identity, how we're situated in our communities, how we honor our lived experience by putting this into our activism. And then we also talked about the importance of understanding interconnectivity and how we are all interconnected, responsible, obligated, related to one another, and what this means in activism, that we are a collective or a community rather than one person. And so in saying that, we are using an asset-based approach, recognizing all of the resources and assets and skills in our communities, all of those things we have in ourselves, and we are building upon all those things that already exist to reimagine and think of opportunities and new solutions for our communities. So in saying that, I thank you, and I will see you in lesson 4 in the next video. Miigwech.